The giant Skymaster F16 1/5 scale is moving on and moving forward. We're still organizing all of our equipment, so let's dive back into this aircraft and keep plugging away. So last video we got a little bit of our equipment installed, and the last thing we finished with was the scale intake support thing that's in the middle there. So that is solid now that we're then on the next day. So what we need to do at this point is just finalize our lighting installation that's going down in the center tank area. Want to get that stuff completed, so once this area is done, then we can get our engine installed, our middle duct installed, and keep moving forward. But we can't really do that until we get this stuff figured out. So there is all of our midship wiring complete. So essentially the battery comes to this point, feeds everything. So we've got one lead going to our smoke pump, which is right there. Another lead going to our onboard compressor, and another lead going to our S-spec, which from there feeds our SPO6 switch for our lighting system, and then the other side feeds our afterburner light. So that is everything midship. Just a lot of organizing there. All of our wires, it looks like they're a mess, but they're all kind of sized for the different locations where we're going to mount this stuff. So next thing to do is get this stuff installed. Compressor's a bit tricky, smoke pump's a bit tricky, but all of our S-spec, SPO6, those items are going by the fuel tank. So we're going to get those things installed first, and I'll show you guys as we work our way through this. All right, so we got all of our lighting components down there. Now I was thinking about putting the smoke UAT down on this side here, but I want to make sure it's all visible. So this is the UAT that we're using on the smoke system. Reason we're doing this is so that we can, number one, have a good fill point for this, and number two, it helps to eliminate air pockets and air bubbles during the smoke usage. So we're using the mini MAP tank, and we've got the primary UAT installed, and that is screwed down to our wood there. So I've got the feed line from the main tanks coming already to the top of the UAT, and so that's set up and that is screwed in place. Now the other items we're going to get in place tonight are going to be the things we have to glue down. So I'm not entirely sure where we're putting the smoke pump yet. That doesn't really matter, but again, I still want it to be accessible. If this smoke pump was to fail, I don't really want to have it buried underneath this area, because then you have to start taking out intakes and everything, and that would just be a nightmare. I'd rather have it accessible somewhere up front or through this lower area down here where you could get it access from the gear. So our V-speak needs to be glued down. Now you can either mount this to a plate or you can glue the mount down. Now if the compressor ever needs to get changed, all you do is undo these 4 bolts. So 1, 2, 3, 4. The mounting is generic, so I like to glue down the 3D mount, depending on, of course, where we're putting it. In this case, it is best for us to glue this guy down so that it is in a nice fixed spot, kind of tucked off to the side of the fuselage. And then I believe we're going to put our smoke UAT kind of in this area as well too, probably just tucked off to that side right there, something like that, where it's not really interfering with the compressor or anything, but I believe that's where we're going to install this guy. So a little bit of non-exciting progress, but we got our UAT tied into the system. So this Flight Composite Tech UAT, it says in the instructions to use like big Tygon on it, but we're using 8mm Festo line. It is possible to get the Festo line on the fittings. You have to cut them at an angle to get the spin clamps or whatever installed on them, so it's a bit of a trick, but it is installed. We did use 8mm Festo line. So we've got a bunch of that stuff finalized in the center part of the aircraft. I'm just getting the smoke system finalized as well. So we mounted the mount for the smoke UAT yesterday, which is fine. Smoke pump itself, we're going to put right on the center of the intake, right over the carbon reinforcement that we installed. So that's why we've mounted it to this piece of aircraft ply. We're going to glue that ply down. And we've got our feed line here, which is 6mm Festo. The nipple on the smoke pump is 4mm, so all you do is you slide a piece of 4mm over top, cut it off right on the end, slide the 6mm over top, and make sure you tie wire it nice and snug. And then we've got our feed line, which is going to go to the back of the aircraft right there. So those will be sitting fairly close to each other. It'll just be a nice little loop. But that's the smoke system sorted out. So it is engine time. We've got things pretty much organized from the whole midsection, everything from the back here that needs to be run forward so far. So I think we're doing pretty good. It's fairly well organized in there. I mean, we can only get it so organized. It's more about fitting stuff in there. So what we're going to do now is we've obviously got our runs from the back here to deal with, but we'll get the engine installed first. Then we'll kind of get those runs laid out. And that's how we're going to progress with this thing. So that is the next steps. We do have to get our afterburner lights. These guys right here, once we get the engine in and these things run forward, they plug in down there. So there's a little bit of things to do before we get that center duct installed. All right, so engine is bolted down and in place. So that is perfect. With the engine bolted in place, you still can pull the duct in and out, which is great, but that is a big accomplishment. I'll show you guys the shot from the back here. All right, and there's our shot from the back. Looks great, nice and centered. Hopefully that shows up on camera, but it is perfect. The monster is in place. Well, I know I got a bit of a sick sense of humor, but that really makes me laugh. That is all of the stuff from the rest of the plane that needs to come forward. What a mess. Oh, sorry. This one tube here goes to the back. All right, so our engine is installed. All of our cables here are run forward. So we just try to be as neat as possible, but functional as possible with these guys. And I think it looks good. So everything's kind of spread out to the side and run forward, which is awesome. And we've got a nice clear area to install our ducting now. Just got our cross brace here put together. So the cross brace comes in 3 pieces. So you got your 2 side pieces, center piece, they're all loose. So what I did was put all of our bolts together and just wicked some thin CA into the plywood. So this just gets soaked up, sprayed some kicker on it, and now it is one solid piece. And that's gonna go there. We're gonna paint this guy as well too, so we'll get that done up as well so it looks a little bit more finished. And I think we're pretty much ready to install our front duct here. So when we put our duct in, what we're going to do is we're going to use probably silicone and fasten that to the former work here. That's going to keep it in place. So we'll probably put a little bit of a bead along here, along the former work, and I'm probably going to put a piece of Gorilla Tape along the top where it butts into the front ducting. Sorry about this view, guys. It's a bit of a struggle for sure. So yeah, where it overlaps on the front duct, on the top section, we'll put a piece of Gorilla Tape, and that'll help join everything together as well. So it should be nice and solid once we get it mounted in there. All right, so we got our duct stuck in. All right, so we got our duct stuck in place with some silicone, and we've got a ball holding it in place. This shows you how much extra support the carbon adds on there. It has no problem supporting that exercise ball. So anyways, we've got to let that kind of cure and leave that thing alone until tomorrow. We're working on our main equipment plate right now, our startup plate, which goes right where that ball is. So here's the layout for the startup plate. Now I'll show you guys what we have going on here. So we're going to have our smoke fill line, which is going to be just a piece of Tygon line with a fuel dot, because that's nice and simple. Coming through this side, we've got the smoke on and off, so that's going to have the 4mm line coming to here, probably go back through a fitting, and then we'll have it come down and go into the engine compartment and split to the two smoke nozzles. We've got our air gauge, our fill valve or BVM fill valve. This is our arming port. So what's going to happen is if this box is our black box for our engine, we've got our power lead that plugs into a battery that's going to come to this point right here. Our negative wire is going to come here, and then our other side of that's going to go to the battery. Now the point of this is this engine, because it's a UAS or UAV engine, it's designed to not turn off when the receiver is turned off, because it's got some functions in it. So basically, when we turn the plane off, the engine is still armed, not necessarily ready to go because it needs a signal, but it's still powered up all the time. So that plug is just going to be an arming plug. All it does is interrupt the negative wire. When we put our battery plug in there, it's going to be joined with a wire. So that's just completing the circuit on the negative side of the battery. So that's just simply an arming plug. So if the owner takes this up, flies the aircraft, has it sitting there for a couple hours, he can unplug the arming plug and the engine power is powered down. The point of this is I don't want him to have to take the nose cone off over and over and over again. I just want it to be an end of the day thing where he takes the nose cone off, pulls the batteries out, and that's it. That's the point of that arming plug. And then our last port here is going to be our fill line for our fuel valve. So this is our startup plate. I'm going to get this stuff installed, starting with the arming plug here, and then we'll kind of work everything else around it. So this is fairly straightforward. You're just making all the holes and everything and making sure it fits. We got our startup plate here all done. Turned out very nice, very happy with it. And it's going to look awesome when it's installed in there. The only thing that we need to really add on here is our through fittings for our 4mm line for the smoke, but we can do that at a little bit later time. This is the layout's what's really important right now. And the last thing we did for tonight was, man, look at that mess. That's so crazy. Was install our air tanks. Now, I was initially going to put an air tank, one on this side, one on that side, but that UAT is kind of in the way for the smoke. So I just tucked the air tanks in there. Now, these air tanks, because we're using the onboard compressor, you could really get away with one air tank. V-Speak, who is the maker of the compressor, Volker actually says that really you don't need to use any air tanks with that pump. But what we use the pump for is when you get to the field, you fill up your air system with a manual pump. That brings it to, let's say, 100 PSI, and the air compressor that's on board basically keeps it at the number that you set it at. So let's say that you're going to have it turn off at 100 PSI and turn on at 80 PSI. It's all done in bar, but you do the conversion, and essentially it just always keeps it in that range. So usually with 2 air tanks, what I find is that you can do a gear up cycle and a gear down cycle, and it usually turns on at that point, but of course it depends on each system's independence. So it's a pretty awesome, cool insurance device, but anyways, we've got it, our tanks installed, and we did that because we used just a dollop of silicone to hold them in place. I put a little bit of CA on there just to help tack it in place because there's nothing to support them, but they're installed right there. We've got our lines coming off our tanks as well too, and I made these a little bit long so we could just tee those guys up and tie them into the air system. So that's it for tonight. We're going to set this girl aside and we'll continue on tomorrow once we got some glue and stuff that is ready to hold things in place. All right, so we painted our cross brace to match the color scheme, the light green color, and we're gonna bolt that in place right now. So my kit didn't have 2 bolts that were long enough, so we're just putting fancy brand new black M3 bolts in. So we'll get that bolted in place. So in continuing with our moving forward in the aircraft, the next logical thing to get done is our leading edge servo on the wing and our missile rails, so we can get those complete. So leading edge setup is very common and typical for Skymaster aircraft. The leading edge slot here, there's the arm that operates the leading edge. There was an addendum in the manual, but it looks like they have changed this. So they never used to put the blocks underneath here, and you needed to put blocks in between the pieces here and the top skin, but they've now added a piece of hardwood under both of those guys, which is perfect. So that's great. Basically what happens here, and we'll go through this, but you have a very short servo arm, and there's a set of bearings that tuck in here, and the servo arm moves this up and down like that, and that's how the leading edge works, and it works great. Very solid system, so we're gonna get that in works here. And then also our missile rails as well too. We've got to figure out how we're mounting those guys on, and we do have to keep access to our pin that goes all the way through. So we're going to get our servo set up here first, and then we're going to move on to the wingtip. Now we've got to get the wingtip done first to route our wire, to go to the root of our wing, but I just want to get everything sorted out with the slat servo first. So I've got our brackets mounted on the servo. Now the Skymaster kits will come with two different types of brackets. One has the recess, one is flat. So in a scenario like this where you don't have much room on the cover, that's where you want to use the recessed ones. This fits really nice. Sometimes you just have to do a little bit of sanding, but we did do a little bit of sanding on the back edge of this one so our wire can have some relief in that point. The proper way to do these, not that it really matters, but you want to have the servo output shaft on, I guess, that side or that type of scenario. You could also do it this way because the centering doesn't really matter, but yeah, anyways, this is the way we do it. So we've got our servo set up here now. That's all Loctited in place. It's important when you tighten these L brackets up that you've got the servo sitting flush like this, so the L brackets are flush with the top of the servo. Now the proper dimension for the center to center measurement on the slat servo arms is 10 millimeters, which if we look at these MKS carbon horns, some of them have an inner hole right there, which is exactly 10 millimeters. So we need to upsize that hole a little bit so our hardware can fit through the back, but it's a very tight position here. This is how it works. So you get tons of force on the servo arm because the output shaft is right here. So that is the setup that we use. And then our actual parts that go on the servo arm, we've got our button head screws. Those come from the back. And then we've got a series of bearings and washers. So in this case, we've got 2 bearings per side, and you just use your washers to space them out properly so the bearings are inserted in the carbon arm. So with that stuff organized, we are going to move on to our missile rails. All right, so the path on the wing here for the lights is a little bit difficult because of the structure. If you try and come this way, there is structure in here that blocks you off, and I don't want to, well, there's actually no good way to drill through the structure. So there is a clear path all the way down the trailing edge of the wing, so we've gone that route. Opened up a little hole here, and then there's actually a hole underneath the wing spar, so we don't need to do any drilling or anything in here, and the wire can just tuck underneath and come out where we need it to come out. All right, so that's our servo arm setup here for the slats. As you can see there, final product. There's 2 washers in between the arm and the first bearing, and then we've got a washer in between every other piece, and that is how these things work. So what we're going to do now is we'll do our ashlock connector on this end because we need to get these guys set up, and we'll try and match both servos up at the same time. So there's not a whole lot of movement here. It's basically moving flaps off or slats off there. Full is going to be somewhere about there, so it's not very much movement at all. All right, guys, so we've got our 1 slat servo done, and we actually had to flip this around. The reason we flipped it around is because our slot in the arm, the actuation arm, was a little bit offset, and it worked better from this position. So it doesn't really change anything other than flipping the servo around, changing our mounts around, but we'll activate this now. So there is slats off, take off, and landing basically maxes out right at the bottom of the channel. So works good, easy to match on the other stuff, and we'll do our other wing now. We also got our root of the wing here done, so we put a bit of snakeskin over top of the wiring, and we've got our ashlock connector. When this gets connected to the wing, everything just gets tucked in the wing portion. All right, wing number 1 installed. That looks really good. We just popped it on just to confirm that everything works good. Our channel for the leading edge does what it's supposed to do. Our connectors all line up, and that looks wonderful. So with wings complete, it is time to move on to our air tray. So I've taken our faux carbon piece here that's been glued previously to our wood, and this is what we're going to mount our air system onto. So we got quite a few valves to fit on here, but it's basically going to go in that area right down there. So what we're going to do in this case is we're going to get all of our valves and everything laid out on here first. We'll get everything screwed down. We'll cut off the screws through the back, sand them down, and then this will get mounted with high sol to the bottom of the fuselage, just like we did on the central box and Cortex. All right, so I'll take you guys through the progression here of the air plate. So this is the first plate I cut out, and the little notch there is for our little shelf support. And that fit really nice underneath there, like that. And the point of that was install it, put our air stuff on top, and then run all of our lines on the side to the central box 320. But this definitely isn't enough space to install all of our air valves. We're basically missing 2 of them on this plate if we stuck with that. So I made a little bit wider plate. It's getting mounted. So if this is this plate going in, this is this plate going in. So there's going to be a gap underneath this plate, which works out really good because number one, we've got more room on the plate to fit all of our valves. That's all of our valves. And then we can run all of our servo leads underneath, and they're basically hidden, come right up into the central box 320. So this is a good way to do it. What I'm going to do next is get all this stuff mounted to the board with screws and stuff. We'll get all of our wires coiled up. Only 2 of our valves plug into the Zykoy sequencer. The rest of these valves all plug into the central box. So we're going to make all these wires nice and coily. All right, we got our air plate installed. So that's high sol down on both edges, and then we use some CA just to tack it in place for that to cure. But that looks awesome. All of our whirly spun connectors are done, and looks good. The wires run underneath the board. I like that. It works really well. If we do need to fish a wire out, it's still not a problem at all. So anyways, that's going to be awesome. All these guys here, those are all of our light wires up there. So they can, our lighting controller is probably going to go up in this area. So they're going to be run out of the way. But yeah, those look good. Happy with that. Some of our lines here are just long enough, like our elevator line. These are just long enough. Fortunately, they're going to go in the red connectors. I know that. So they're kind of at the base of the central box, which is good. But all of our other lines are going to be cut to just the right length where they come up nicely and plug into the central box. So that is awesome. Next thing we're going to do tonight before we wrap this up is we got to get our air cylinder set and installed because we have to have a mount that mounts down here. And that is one of the things that we need to do so we can work on that tomorrow. So I'm going to start getting that organized, and I'll come back and show you guys the progress. All right, so the last thing tonight we did is glue in our mount for our canopy air cylinder. Now, the kit did not come with a mount, no mounting location, nothing like that. So I took some aircraft ply plates. I cut some slots. We've got nice contact there, and high soled this all in place. It's tack glued in place with some CA, but this will be nice and strong. Also, our support shelf here that we add in helps to strengthen this whole thing up as well and add some rigidity to it. So that's good. That's going to cure until tomorrow, and we've got good access to all of our airlines and everything. So that is some wicked steps done today. Very happy with the progress. We're going to be back at this thing tomorrow. All right, we're back on the F16. We did put the kinetics in a shipping crate, and that is ready to go to the new owner, so that's awesome. We still have the Superland for sale. If you are interested, shoot me an email, thelightersideofrc@gmail.com. Very fun plane to fly and huge. Okay, so we're gonna flip the F16 over. There's a bunch of detail stuff to do now. So we gotta do our startup plate, all of our wiring, airlines. I just wanna get the filler done on our holes we originally did on the underside of the intake. So we're gonna get this guy flipped over on the stand, and basically it's gonna flip over and go exactly where it is right now. So we're gonna have one support here, one support there. All right, so this is the area where we installed our carbon rods in the landing gear system to hold the landing gear or add more support. So we're going to take some filler, some polyester filler, and just fill these holes in. I'm not going to worry about sanding this down. That'll be one of the steps we do when we weather this aircraft. But I just want to get these filled because I've got help here to flip the plane over, and that'll allow that time to cure. All right, so we mixed up some polyester filler. This stuff kicks off really quick, so we don't have tons of time to work with it, but we will get our holes filled. It's a little difficult on the angle. Actually, what I'm going to do is use a glove and just spot fill them with my finger. Otherwise, there's going to be a whole bunch of sanding to do. I also run the risk of filling in the rest of the details, which I don't want to do. So we'll just do it like this and make it work. Now this stuff kicks off really quick. You pretty much have, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes to work with it. There, so we've got too much installed, which is good. So when I sand these down, it's probably going to be just fine the way it is. And then I may have to go back and fill a couple pinholes, but probably not because these are such small areas. So that's basically what you're doing. And yeah, so before we weather this, we'll just sand all this down, make it look pretty, paint this gray because we've got the color match already done for the Skymaster gray. And that's it. So just taking a look around the underside of the aircraft here. There's our vent lines. It's always different looking at everything from the underside. So our vent lines are there. We've got our fuel vent line, our smoke vent line, and this stuff, I just wanted to show you too, is already kicked off. It's already rubbery. So it'll take a while to actually harden up, like maybe 20 minutes, but it's done kicking off already. So yeah, and there's a shot of the underside of the plane. While we've got the plane in this situation too, we'll put our tail hook on. Yes, F16s have tail hooks. They're not for resting during aircraft carrier landings. They're for holding the aircraft back during engine test runs and so forth, and for emergencies. So we'll get that done as well too, and then we'll flip the plane back over. All right, so we got everything run through our board here. This is our startup board. The last thing we have to do is our battery connections for the turbine. Now this is the arming plug as we've talked about. So we're going to take the plug, run it back to here, get our wiring done up, and then the wiring is going to run forward all the way to the nose where we're going to have the battery mounted. So that's the last thing to do. Once those things are in place, then we can tuck the board in and get it screwed in place. So we've got our engine hatch and startup plate all done, and there we go. So this is our fuel fill line, air fill valve, GSU plug. This is our arming port for our turbine. So this just has or is going to have a plug like this that goes in, completes the circuit on the negative side. So there'll be a little loop and a little cover that covers everything up. And we've got our smoke on and off, obviously air pressure, smoke fill right here. And this is our feed from our smoke pump, which goes to our valve, and then that's going to come off to twin smoke nozzles. All right, so last thing here is our arming plug. So again, this completes the circuit on the turbine negative side. So that's just a wire and a cover, and that is awesome. So that stuff's all ready to go. This is our smoke line here. I'm going to leave that for a little bit until we get things a little more organized on that. Our filling line for the fuel side, we've got a little keeper or a whole system that goes on here, so we'll figure out a spot to put that stuff. But things are looking wonderful. All right, we got our little fuel catch high salt in place, so we're going to leave the midsection here to do its thing and move on to the front section. So first thing we're doing is the air system. A lot to do with the air system. I've kind of done this in steps. So we've got our air board and stuff. There's a line coming all the way forward, which is this black line right here. And we have the compressor mounted in this portion of the aircraft. And this is the lead that's coming off the compressor. So this is how we set all the planes up. It's pretty straightforward. You've got a piece of Teflon line because the air coming out of the compressor is extremely hot. This is 4 millimeters, so this just plugs into the end of the compressor. We've got a check valve, so it allows the compressor to push out air and not get it back. And we've got a piece of 4 mil Festo that steps down from a 4 to 3 mil, a piece of 3 mil Festo, and that ties into a Festo T. Now the way this is going to work is this comes off the compressor. This line right here goes directly to our air board. The air board right here, and that's going to supply pressure to the entire air board. So it's direct from the compressor, and then on this other side right here of our T, this is going to split off and tie in to our air tanks, and we'll have another T in there. So air tanks are here, represented by the T. So air tank 1, air tank 2, little section of line comes over. This is where the line from the back of our airplane, the fill line, is going to come to right there. And then this is going to be connected to this system. So that's a very basic system. There's not a lot of connections here. Nice and simple, nice and short. This lead coming here, of course, starts to feed our entire air system. So that's the air layout. Very simple and very functional. Now, I know lots of people will question using a compressor on an aircraft. We use them on all of our aircraft. They work amazing. It's good insurance, and it really works outstanding. It allows you to run less air cylinders, which really isn't a big deal because they don't weigh anything, but you also don't need a whole bunch of different systems on the aircraft. So on an aircraft like this, we've got one system. Everything's powered by the compressor. Now, we do build in a little bit of insurance with our systems like this, and I'll explain to you what we do. So that line coming forward off the compressor, essentially the only thing it's really going to be feeding is our gear valve, our door valve. Of course, we're going to have a T coming to our sequencer, and the last thing it's going to feed is our air brakes in the back. So assuming this is the air brake system here. So it's only going to feed those 4 items. Everything else, so our canopy open close, our chute mechanism, our wheel brake mechanism, that all is going to be fed off of the gear down line. So if we've got our gear down line here, then there's going to be a T coming off there, and the only time this other stuff gets power or air supply is when the gear is in the down position. So that simply just builds in a little bit of insurance that your canopy's not opening and closing when the gear's up, your chute's not going to open unless the gear is down, and you don't have wheel brakes sucking air from the system unless your gear is down. So a little bit of insurance built in. All right, so there is our air plate all plumbed. The only thing left to plumb is the canopy and the lock. I haven't plumbed those because I want to get all the wiring done, because we want to get those done with the canopy installed. I guess we could do the open close, but anyways, we're going to save that till the end, and we're going to get all of our wiring done. Okay, so we've got our gear down line, which is this blue line here, and that gear down line, you can see the T. That T feeds our brake, our chute, our canopy open close, and our canopy lock. So none of those systems have air in them until our gear is in the down position. So that is a kind of a critical thing, and that'll make sure if we do happen to have any leaks on those systems, it doesn't bleed off air. All right, guys, and it's time for another episode of Tip Time, and this Tip Time is brought to you by Trusty Bent Screwdriver. So lately I've been doing most of my servo leads when we've got a tray to hide it under, out of the aircraft, or in a scenario like this. When you're doing them inside the aircraft, so all of these servo leads have been very tight. There's zero excess here. They're all just long enough. I always make sure I have a little catch tray in here. So when I strip off the wire sheathing from the actual servo itself, you're always going to get little pieces of fine wire. The servo wire, like a couple pieces from each one. You don't want those just floating around in your aircraft. Use a catch bin like this. So I'll strip them over top of the catch bin, spin them over top of the catch bin, and then I just vacuum this catch bin out every once in a while. I can see a little piece of wire down there. There's one right there. So just do your best to catch those things. It's important. I can't remember how long ago it was, but I think I remember seeing a post somewhere. Dave Wilshire had like a Powerbox Royal or something like that, and he was having a problem with it. I think he sent it back to Powerbox, and they saw, I think in the actual Powerbox unit, one of those little pieces of wire that had spanned 2 contact points, and it was causing an issue. So that little piece of wire can be very detrimental, so you want to make sure you clean all those things up. All right, so I prepped our random motion generator here. Now these things are pretty awesome little devices. Your input comes on this side, and this is your 2 outputs. So if you have 2 pilots, you use that. What I do is, the board doesn't come with this clear shrink tube, so I use a piece of shrink tube, get that installed. It's very thick. That just prevents any contacts or shorting of the unit. And then I cut out the little adjustments here, so you have frequency, position, and rate. So those can be adjusted with little screwdriver. All right, and if you guys are interested in live streams, we do a live stream here from the shop on our other channel, The Lighter Side of RC After Dark, and it's a completely separate channel. We live stream for about 2 hours every 2 weeks. I love the live stream because you guys that watch the live stream ask questions, we get to interact, it's tons of fun. So one of the benefits for joining the live stream is you get to see stuff way in advance. So as an example, you would see the stuff we're doing now about a week or two in advance during the live streams. And it's obviously, you know, we might only do a tiny little thing, but it's a real behind the scenes look of what goes on here in the shop. So that is it for this video, guys. We got a ton of organizing done in this video. I think we're going to be wrapping up the build portion in the next video. Then there'll be another one on weathering. That's the theory behind the videos. We still have a lot of organizing to do. We got to test run the engine as well, fuel system, CG check, do all of that stuff. And then we'll get into the weathering of the aircraft. So tons to complete still. Thanks guys for watching, and keep joining in to see the progress on this beautiful Skymaster F16. We'll see you in the next video.